The battlefield was chaos. Smoke curled into the violet sky, and the sharp scent of ozone mixed with the acrid smell of burning metals. Alien machines roared as they tore through the rocky terrain, their claws tearing the ground as easily as paper. Humans moved cautiously among the debris, their armor scorched and battered, yet their faces were resolute. Captain Elias Grant led a small team forward, scanning the horizon for signs of the enemy. For years, humanity had underestimated the Xylarians. The alien species was known for its ruthlessness and its strict hierarchy. Their queen ruled with absolute authority, and their warriors obeyed without question. Yet, in the heat of this battle, humans were proving something unexpected. Despite being outnumbered, they were not running. They were thinking, acting, and surviving in ways that even the Xylarians could not predict. A sharp scream tore through the air, cutting through the rumble of machines and explosions. Elias froze, his instincts immediately alert. The sound was alien, but desperate, filled with pain. He turned toward it and saw a small figure struggling to move across the rocky ground. A young Xylarian scout had been struck by a plasma bolt, her limbs shaking as she tried to crawl away from the advancing humans. "Medic!" Elias shouted, sprinting forward. The scout's bright teal eyes widened as she saw him coming, a mixture of fear and pain in her gaze. Her wing-like appendages twitched involuntarily, and she let out another weak cry. "Stand back!" one of his soldiers called, hesitating. "She's Xylarian!" Elias ignored him. "She's alive," he said firmly, "and she's in trouble. We help the wounded. That's what we do." With careful hands, he knelt beside her. The plasma wound on her side smoked slightly, and he could feel the heat radiating from her body. He gently lifted her into his arms, careful not to aggravate her injury. The scout's small hands pressed against his chest, trembling, but she did not struggle. Somehow she seemed to sense that he meant no harm. Above the battlefield, the Xylarian queen watched from her hovering platform. Her eyes, sharp and calculating, widened as she saw the human carrying her injured daughter. For a moment, she froze completely. 1,000 emotions surged through her, anger, disbelief, fear. But beneath them all was a shock she could not deny. Humans were supposed to be reckless, inferior, unpredictable. They were supposed to strike without honor or mercy. Yet here was a human risking his life to save her child. The queen's command over her forces faltered. Her soldiers hovered in the air, unsure whether to continue the assault. She had never hesitated before, never questioned the orders she gave. But now, watching her daughter's life cradled in the arms of a human, the foundations of everything she believed began to tremble. Elias moved quickly, retreating toward the relative safety of a collapsed bunker. Around him, the firefight continued, but he kept his focus on the scout. He retrieved a portable med kit, his hands steady despite the chaos. With careful precision, he cleaned the wound, applied a cooling gel, and wrapped it securely. The scout's breathing slowed as the pain dulled slightly, and her eyes followed him closely, unblinking. "You're going to be okay," Elias said softly. He didn't know if she understood his words, but he hoped the tone carried the message. "You're safe now." The Xylarian scout made a low, almost musical sound. Elias tilted his head, realizing it was some kind of purr, a sound of relief and trust. He smiled faintly, feeling a strange warmth in his chest. Humanity had always prided itself on its compassion, but never had he felt it so strongly as in this moment, holding an alien life in his hands and knowing he had made a difference. Meanwhile, the queen could not look away. Her vision blurred slightly, and she felt her heart tighten in ways she had never experienced before. All of her carefully cultivated prejudice against humans, the belief that they were nothing more than aggressive intruders, was crumbling. How could one human, frail by Xylarian standards, show such courage and care for her child? The scout's breathing became more steady, and she moved her small hands to touch the human's chest, almost tentatively. Elias noticed it and froze. This was not a sign of fear, it was trust. A creature from another world, trained to survive at all costs, was allowing him to protect her. He could feel the weight of the moment. Every second mattered, not just for the scout, but for what it symbolized. A bridge between two species that had been enemies for far too long. Suddenly, a loud explosion rocked the ground nearby, throwing Elias off balance. He stumbled, tightening his hold on the scout. Her eyes widened in panic, and for a moment, fear gripped him too, but he pushed it down. He would not falter, not now, not ever, while her life was in his hands. "Keep moving," he shouted to his team. "Cover us!" The human soldiers responded with precision, laying down suppressive fire that kept the Xylarians at bay. The queen, still hovering above, barked orders, but her voice lacked the usual force. Her soldiers hesitated, unsure whether to obey fully or withdraw. She had never doubted her command before, yet the image of her daughter in the human's arms had shattered something deep within her. As they reached the bunker, Elias carefully laid the scout down on a flat surface. He activated a small medical scanner, watching the glowing readings that told him she was stable but still weak. She closed her eyes briefly, then looked back at him with a faint, trusting smile. Elias knelt beside her, speaking softly. "We'll get you out of this. You'll see your mother again." The scout's hands moved slightly, touching his shoulder, as if to confirm she understood. In that moment, Elias realized something profound. This was more than a battle between humans and Xylarians. It was a test of understanding, of courage, and of trust. One small act of care could ripple across a universe, challenging everything both sides thought they knew. The queen finally descended from her platform, landing with a grace that seemed almost ceremonial. Her gaze never left her daughter. She had not anticipated seeing her child alive and in the hands of a human, and it forced her to confront uncomfortable truths. The universe was not as simple as she had believed. Humans were more than fighters. They were thinkers, caregivers, and brave souls who could act with honor even in the midst of chaos. Elias stood slowly, facing the queen. He did not kneel, nor did he show fear. He simply held the scout gently, letting her rest against him. His eyes met hers, conveying a message that transcended words. Her daughter was safe, and he meant no harm. For a long moment, the queen said nothing. The battle continued around them, but time seemed to stretch, caught between disbelief and cautious curiosity. She had trained her entire life to command and to dominate, yet here was a human showing her something entirely new. Courage and empathy in equal measure. Finally she spoke, her voice calm but firm. "She is mine," she said, gesturing toward her daughter. Elias nodded, understanding the need to respect her authority. Slowly, he set the scout down so the queen could approach, but he did not step away completely. He remained close, ready to act if her child needed him again. The scout looked up at her mother and then back at Elias. There was no fear in her gaze, only gratitude and trust. The queen observed this carefully. It was a lesson she had never expected to learn, that courage could take many forms, and sometimes it came from the most unlikely of places. By the time the smoke began to clear from the battlefield, the queen had made her decision. Her daughter was safe, and she would return her, but she would also remember the human who had risked everything. That act of bravery would not be forgotten. For the first time, she considered that humans might be allies, not just enemies. Elias watched as the queen carried her daughter away, still stunned by what had happened. The scout's hand briefly reached out to touch his arm again before she disappeared into her mother's embrace. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes. It was a sign that the trust he had built in those few chaotic minutes had mattered. As the queen and her daughter departed, the human soldiers regrouped. Elias felt a quiet pride, tempered by the understanding that the war was far from over. But he also knew something important. Sometimes bravery and compassion could change even the hardest hearts, and one small act could alter the course of a species' future. The sun set over the battlefield, casting long shadows across the scarred terrain. Smoke rose in twisted columns, and distant explosions reminded everyone that the fight was not done. Yet, amidst the chaos, a new possibility had emerged, a chance for understanding, a spark of hope, and the undeniable proof that humanity's courage could inspire even the most unyielding hearts. Elias stood alone for a moment, looking out at the horizon. He felt the weight of what had happened settle in his chest. In the midst of war, he had done something extraordinary, not through power, but through care. And somewhere, far above, the Queen of the Xylarians would remember that too. The battlefield had quieted, though distant explosions still shook the ground. The Xylarian queen hovered above the rocky terrain, her daughter cradled carefully in her arms. Her eyes remained fixed on the human who had risked everything to save her child. Captain Elias Grant stood a few meters away, watching quietly, his posture calm but alert. He had no weapons drawn, yet his presence was firm, steady, a silent promise that he would not flee or falter. The queen had never felt such confusion. For centuries, her species had been trained to see humans as reckless, unworthy of trust, and dangerous. Yet here was undeniable proof that her long-held beliefs were incomplete. This human had acted not out of duty or fear, but out of care. He had approached her daughter with gentleness and courage, and the result was life. A life that would have been lost without him. She descended slowly, her hovering wings folding around her in a protective gesture. Elias remained still, letting her approach. When she landed, the scout stirred in her mother's arms, looking at both the queen and the human. She made a soft sound, one that the queen recognized as a mixture of comfort and acknowledgement. For the first time, the queen saw her daughter's eyes light up not just with relief but with trust, not only in her mother, but in this human who had saved her. The queen's voice was steady, yet there was a weight to it she had not expected. "You saved her," she said. It was not a question. It was a statement, simple but profound. Elias nodded slightly. "I did what anyone would do," he replied. "I could not leave her there to die." The queen studied him carefully. His eyes held neither arrogance nor fear, only honesty. He was not lying. She could feel it. She had encountered humans before, fought against them, and faced their cunning. But she had never encountered one who acted purely for compassion. Her daughter stirred again, reaching toward Elias briefly before nestling back against her mother. The queen's heart tightened. How could one human inspire such trust and courage in her child? She realized that this was more than an act of bravery. It was a bridge between two species that had known nothing but conflict for centuries. Elias stepped forward slowly, keeping his hands visible. "I want to return her safely," he said. "I will not interfere with your authority." The queen inclined her head slightly, considering his words. "You will not leave her?" she asked, the edge of her voice betraying her curiosity. "I will stay until she is fully safe," he replied. "And I will leave only when you are sure she is unharmed." A long pause followed. The queen's mind raced. She had always believed that humans were violent, unpredictable, and unworthy of respect. Yet in these moments, she was confronted with a reality she could not ignore. Elias had acted not out of fear, not out of strategy, but out of empathy. And her daughter's survival, and her willingness to reach for him, was proof that his actions were sincere. Finally, the queen spoke again. "Come closer." Her voice was firm, but without hostility. Elias obeyed, stepping a few meters toward her. She placed her daughter gently on the ground, letting the scout move toward him if she wished. The scout paused, looking at both of them. Then, with a quiet sound, she touched Elias's arm once more before stepping back toward her mother. It was a silent acknowledgement of trust. The queen's eyes softened. "Your species. It is unlike what I believed," she admitted. "I have been taught to fear humans, to see them as obstacles, as threats. Yet you have proven something different, something I cannot ignore." Elias nodded. "I cannot speak for all humans. Some may be as your teachings describe. But I can tell you this: many of us choose courage, honor, and compassion over hatred and fear." The queen looked at him for a long moment. The battle had tested her authority, her pride, and her beliefs, but now it tested something even deeper: her understanding of life, trust, and survival. She had never allowed herself to question her perception of humanity, but Elias's actions demanded she reconsider. A low hum resonated from the distance as the Xylarian forces regrouped. Their ships hovered silently, awaiting further orders. The queen's soldiers looked to her for guidance, their weapons ready, yet none moved aggressively. They too sensed the change in their leader's demeanor. Something had shifted. The humans' bravery had created a pause, a gap in the endless cycle of combat. The queen turned her attention back to Elias. "If your words are true," she said carefully, "then perhaps there is a path forward that does not require endless conflict." Elias felt a cautious hope stir within him. "There can be," he said. "It will take time, but small acts of trust, like today, can change everything." The scout stirred again, her small hands brushing against the queen's armor. She looked at Elias with a flicker of recognition and gratitude. The queen knelt slightly, placing a protective hand on her daughter's shoulder. "She trusts you," the queen observed. "And I cannot deny that I do as well." Elias gave a small, respectful bow of his head. "That is all I could hope for," he said. The queen stood slowly, her expression composed but thoughtful. "There will be consequences for this decision," she warned. "Not all of my people will understand why I have spared you, why I have allowed this trust to exist. Many will see it as weakness." Elias shook his head slightly. "Perhaps. But strength is not only in power or force. It is also in courage, in compassion, and in the ability to choose wisely. Today, that strength saved your daughter." The queen studied him again, seeing the truth in his words. She realized that this human had demonstrated a form of power entirely different from her own, one that did not rely on fear or domination, but on integrity, empathy, and bravery. It was a revelation that unsettled her, but also inspired her. "Very well," she said finally. "You will leave this planet unharmed, but on one condition. You and your people must respect our borders until we can meet again under terms of dialogue, not war." Elias nodded. "We will honor that." The queen looked down at her daughter, who now hovered slightly, testing her strength, then back at Elias. A quiet acknowledgement passed between them. She had seen what humanity was capable of, and it had changed something inside her. The years of prejudice, the assumptions about humans, had been challenged by one simple act of courage. She motioned to her soldiers, who lowered their weapons. A silent agreement passed among them. Today, battle was set aside. The human had earned their respect, even if only partially through his actions. Elias finally exhaled, allowing himself a moment of relief. He had not only saved a life, but had sown a seed of understanding that could grow into something far greater. The Queen's willingness to reconsider, to see beyond her biases, was a victory not just for him or his team, but for the possibility of peace between two very different worlds. As he prepared to depart, the Queen spoke one last time. "Remember this moment," she said. "Let it guide your actions, as it has guided mine." Elias inclined his head. "I will, and I hope that one day our peoples will fight side by side, not against each other." The scout, now fully alert, chirped softly and hovered near her mother. The Queen reached out to touch her gently, then looked at Elias one final time. There was no animosity in her gaze, only the quiet understanding that some acts of bravery could reshape the course of history. The human team moved toward their ships, weapons sheathed, movements deliberate and calm. The Queen watched them go, her mind racing with the possibilities that lay ahead. For the first time, she imagined a future where humans and Xylarians could coexist, where courage and empathy could define their relations instead of fear and violence. The sun dipped below the jagged horizon, painting the sky with deep shades of orange and violet. Smoke still rose from the battlefield, but it no longer symbolized destruction alone. It was a reminder of survival, of unexpected alliances, and of the small moments that could change worlds. Elias paused briefly at the edge of the landing platform, looking back at the Queen and her daughter. He felt a quiet pride, a deep sense of fulfillment. Humanity had proven its courage once again, not through domination or conquest, but through care, empathy, and bravery. He knew that the road ahead would not be easy, but for the first time, he felt that the impossible might be possible. The ships lifted off, gliding silently into the sky. The Queen and her daughter watched them disappear, a spark of hope kindling in her heart. She had seen the truth about humans, and it had shaken her world. Perhaps, she thought, this was the beginning of something greater, a future where courage, trust, and compassion could bridge the gap between species, where humanity's strength lay not only in its arms but in its heart. And somewhere far above, the stars seemed to shine a little brighter, as if acknowledging that the universe itself had witnessed a moment of courage that might forever change the balance between worlds.